They will kill you. But first, they must catch you.
Hello and welcome to I Can't Believe It's Not the Mouse, the podcast all about animated movies not from Disney. I'm your host, Octaviano Macias, and today we're talking about the last movie I'll be doing this October, and that is Watership Down. Now, Watership Down, that's kind of a weird choice when you think about it, right? I mean, realistically, it is not a horror movie like the way the other ones have been. Like, it's not a parody of The Wolfman like Crystal Rare Rabbit was. It's not about this ghost in a house, which was Monster House. It doesn't even have zombies. It doesn't have witches. It's just rabbits. And yet, I felt it was very fitting for this month. Mainly because a lot of the imagery in that movie is kind of terrifying when you look at it. I mean, realistically, this is a movie that has scarred a lot of children, even though, because this was from the UK, so when it was released, it was given like their equivalent of the G rating, but it was not very well received by many. Not in terms of the quality of the movie. The movie is well liked and it is well beloved, but in terms of people who felt that this was too much, like kids were getting scarred, and to be fair, some kids probably did get scarred from this movie because, yeah, the visuals in this can be very terrifying. There's a lot of scenes where, like, if a character is getting hurt, if a rabbit's getting pretty much killed in some way, they don't shy away from showing the blood. They don't shy away from just how nasty it can get. Now, to be fair, it never goes too far that a kid can't watch, but it is to a point where I'm like, you might want to have a parent nearby just so they can calm the kid down if it becomes too much. And understandably, it will become too much. It's just that much of an intense movie. And that's kind of why I decided to go with this one. Now, I know I could have just gone with any other movie. I mean, realistically, there are a lot of spooky movies that I could have chosen. But again, I wanted to do something that was a little different. I didn't want to go with the first thing that came to mind. I didn't want to just be like, well, there's like 30 Hotel Transylvania movies, so let's do one of those. No, I wanted to do something really different, and this one came up, and I was like, you know what? I've never actually seen Watership Down. I've heard a lot of good things about it. I've heard a lot of people say it's traumatizing, so I figured this sounds about right. Just a movie that has terrifying visuals. And in a way, even going beyond that, this does feel kind of right in the sense that a lot of this movie feels like a horror movie in a way. Like, not so much in terms of just the visuals, but in terms of, it's a movie where the rabbits are always in danger. They're always, that close to being killed. So it kind of feels like a horror movie in that way. It's not presented as such, but it is, to a certain degree, a movie that I'm like, yeah, I can see this being, a part of someone's, horror features. I mean, I wouldn't say it's spooky. Of course, there's no monsters in it, but it is something where I'm like, yeah, this is a bit much. It's pretty intense, and, it's a fun movie. It is a really solid movie. This is the second time I've had a movie that I've never actually seen before on this show, the first one being Pompoko, and once again, it's just one that I'm like, this is impressive. This is a really good, a solid movie, and I'm, kind of bummed that it took me until this to do it, but I'm glad that I did chose to watch it, and it's why I'm glad that I'm doing this now, just because it gives me the chance to watch things that I've never seen before. Now, what Watership Down is about, if you've never heard about this, it's basically these rabbits. Now, at the start of the movie, you kind of get like an idea of how their rabbit-like religion works. Like, you got this whole thing where it's like, okay, so the sun is pretty much a god named Frith, and Frith pretty much created the land. He created the creatures, and at first there were a bunch of not really like the same creatures, but generic creatures, I would say. Like, there was nothing really special about any of the animals to each other, and at some point the rabbit-like creature led by the prince, I believe it was El Harahara or Iharara, I'm sorry if I messed that up, but point is that the rabbit prince was like, hey, let's multiply all the rabbits all around, just have a lot of fun, let's eat a bunch of stuff, to the point that all the other creatures were getting upset because they were like, we're not eating anything, and these rabbits are pretty much surrounding the land. And the sun god Frith is pretty much like, hey, look, you gotta stop eating all this stuff, you gotta stop partying, you gotta stop filling up the place with your bunny kids, or, face my wrath. The bunny prince is pretty much like, yeah, you're not going to do anything about it. So, of course, she's like, the sun god Frith decides, okay, then, if you don't want to believe me, here we go. We're going to start giving all these creatures, abilities to hunt you down, to eat you. We're going to make you very delicious. Every creature hates you because you're the asshole, and then yeah, you're just gonna be the animal that's hunted down. And of course, this freaks out the rabbit prince. The rabbit prince ends up regretting his decision. So Frith is pretty much like, okay, look, I get now that you're that you understand this was messed up for you to do. So okay, all I'm going to do is I'm going to give you legs that make you run faster, make you jump higher, give you the gift of being intelligent, ears that can hear a lot more, than what you normally could have, and just give you like these special abilities. But you're still going to be hunted down just because that was your punishment for what you did. But at the very least, I'm giving you a good chance on surviving. So long as you don't get caught, you'll live. So embrace your gifts, because that's the only way you're not going to get killed, if you embrace your gift. So yeah, that pretty much sums up the world, and it's pretty interesting. I mean, when it comes to world building, especially when it comes to stuff that is supposed to be religion-like, it can be hit or miss. Sometimes they go too deep into it, and it's just like, okay, I don't know what you're trying to say. Sometimes it's too simple, or sometimes we just don't know enough to make it fully work. This is one of those cases where I felt like, yeah, this was really well thought out. It was really well told. It's simple, but it's complex, and it feels like something that you would actually hear. I don't know, maybe it is based on some actual story, but as far as I know, this is something that's just original to this specific story, whether it's the movie or the book. It's nothing that existed prior to this, so I'm not too sure if maybe it is inspired by something, but for what it is, very interesting, and I gotta commend them for that. Now, this is all just set up to what is pretty much the rest of the movie, which is you start off with this group of rabbits. You have this one called Fiverr who is freaking out because he's like seeing these visions of like, oh, it's gonna be the end of the rabbit group that they're in, because pretty much rabbits are divided by groups. I mean, it's kind of like normal stuff in real life, but here they make it sound like more official, like, oh, it gets your warrens, it's your groups, here's some officers, here's the chief, all that stuff. It's like, it's, I wouldn't say complicated, but it's pretty much like the kind of thing that you would see people doing, only rabbits are doing it, which is, cool idea. So yeah, Fiverr is pretty much freaking out, like, oh, we're gonna die. And so, because Fiverr is freaking out, eventually his brother, Hazel, is pretty much like, okay, look, he's always been pretty much legit about everything he predicts. Like, whether it's something bad, something good, he always gets it right. If he's freaking out about this, I think he's onto something. So he goes try to tell the chief. One of the guards is pretty much not letting him go through. Eventually lets him go through, and they tell it to the chief, and the chief pretty much ignores it, and he's like, okay, we'll think about it, but realistically, don't even bother, going into it. Eventually, they're like, okay, look, he's not listening to us, so you know what, we're gonna take anyone who actually believes us and just get out, because something bad's gonna happen. Like, he knows his stuff. And eventually the guard that was pretty much blocking it at the start of the movie, Bigwig, he's pretty much like, okay, I'm joining you guys. Like, I know that the chief said no, but I kind of buy everything you're telling me, especially based on the information you're giving. So yeah, they end up going, so they're pretty much looking for their own land, and there's like trouble in there, like, there's water, because rabbits can't really swim, so, well, some of them can't swim. Different creatures that are trying to kill them, they stumble upon a farm, and that farm plays a big part in the story, and eventually they do find the land that they were looking for, which is pretty much Watership Down. But the movie doesn't end there, because the movie smartly addresses, like, hey, look, even though we found the land, this is not paradise just yet. So I kind of like that they start going more into it. Like, a lot of movies might have been better ending off with them just finding the promised land, but in here they fully acknowledge, like, look, all the rabbits that are here are pretty much just guys. Like, the one woman that we had ended up getting killed in our journey to find this place. We need to find women because we need to get laid. I mean, they don't say it that way, but that's pretty much the general idea. And, it's not in terms of like a raunchy comedy in a way. It's just them acknowledging, like, look, the reality of this thing is that we need women if we want to have kids, if we want this area to live with rabbits, we want to grow, So they're pretty much like, yeah, we have to get our women. So eventually what happens is that they find this this bird who pretty much is damaged, has a wing that's damaged. They end up repairing it for him. The bird ends up helping them, like, okay, I'm gonna look for some female rabbits so you can, do your thing, because you really need your female rabbits if you want to have families and all that stuff. As that's going on, you have Hazel and some of the other rabbits trying to get some of the female rabbits that they encountered in the farm, because there was a farm, like I mentioned earlier, that pretty much had some female rabbits, but they were pretty much in captivity, because what it is like, okay, the farmer has the rabbits, but ends up, fine. It pretty much they're just being raised to be eaten is what it comes down to. They have complications there. It doesn't really work out. So eventually they do have to find another way to get female rabbits, which, as they pretty much established, like, okay, there's actually a nearby warren full of rabbits, only that's more of a totalitarian state for them, because the chief of the rabbits forces them to stay within certain areas. They can't go out at certain times and all that stuff. So that becomes like pretty much the main thing driving the movie from then on, because it's like, okay, we already found our peace, now we gotta get the female rabbits from this place, and it turns out that it's gonna be a lot harder, because they're not gonna let us borrow some of their female rabbits. They're gonna be fighting against us. So eventually it's a whole out battle, and it's just really cool to see. It's really intense. Like I said, Bigwig gets into some fights. We get to see Hazel outsmart some characters, and we see the struggles with them. That bird that helps them out does some stuff with them to help them. Because even though he's constantly irritated by them, he does acknowledge, like, hey, look, you helped me out, so, I'll help you out. But he's constantly irritated. He's kind of slow in a way, but he pretty much is well-meaning at the end of the day. And it's a lot of fun with that character. I believe he was voiced by the comedian Zero Mostel before he passed away. And yeah, in terms of cast, I mean, I'm not familiar with a lot of these people. I do know John Hurt is the main character, so that's honestly neat, the main character being Hazel. But yeah, a lot of these people I'm not really too familiar with, but, I gotta say, great voice cast, the animation, at times it's not, I wouldn't say it's bad. It's not bad. It's definitely not Disney-esque. It's not like the kind of thing that you would see with a big budget. When you think of animation that's top-notch, this is probably not going to come to mind automatically, but it is a very nice looking movie. Like, at times it does look like at different points it depends, because sometimes it looks like a water painting, sometimes it feels like, I don't want to say this in a way that sounds insulting, but it does feel like a children's cartoon, like something that you would probably see on TV on some random day, that has a budget but is not exactly extravagant. It's not like this big budget thing, but it is still well animated. Like the stuff where it gets gruesome with the blood, that stuff is really well, really well drawn. I mean, it's to a point where it's like, this is some of the most violent looking images I've seen in any animated movie, and it's really effective. I mean, it really gives you this idea that, yeah, these rabbits could die at any point because everything is out to get them, so that's really well done. But like I said, sometimes it's like a water painting, sometimes like with the characters, the rabbits, the way they move, it kind of feels like something that you would see on TV, but a higher end thing that you would see on that. And sometimes it just feels like something independent that was made by a group of people who might not have had the most support, but definitely had like a passion for what they were doing and a love for the book that they were adapting. Now, in terms of how this compares to the book, that I can't say. Unfortunately, I've never actually read the book. I've heard it's faithful to the book, so at the very least, that sounds promising. I've heard like there are some differences, but not to a point that it's like, like a Disney-fied version of the story. It is pretty much taking it with a lot of respect, the way that you would, assume for like a story of this kind. So, that's great. It's definitely, like, because it definitely doesn't feel like something that you would have seen Disney put out, whether it was in that time period or even now, because it definitely is more mature at times. Like, it's more willing to showcase, like, this is the rough life of these creatures, and there's no sugarcoating it. If a rabbit gets killed, it gets killed, so that's what it comes down to. So yeah, on that front, it's definitely very well done, and it's definitely different from the competition. Pretty much the competition that everyone will always assume this is gonna be, because like, what I'm trying to say there is, like, Disney is so synonymous when it comes to animation, with animation, that whether it's a Disney movie or not, most people, especially those who are not too into this stuff, will automatically assume that, yeah, this is some Disney cartoon, which, fine. I mean, I'm not gonna complain to people who don't really know this stuff. I mean, I understand. If you ask me, between any K-pop bands, I'm like, they're all BTS, I guess. I don't know, since I'm not really a big fan of that stuff. But, I mean, not to disrespect it, just acknowledging where I have my feelings on. So that's kind of where I'm at when it comes to this. So, yeah, like, it's not like a Disney cartoon, even though I know some people will probably mistake it for such. But it's definitely one of the more solid movies that you would see coming out around this time period that wasn't from Disney, because of course there's a lot of them that maybe don't even hold up, aren't even remembered, and I can't say that it's entirely for good reasons, because of course some movies were just unfairly judged for not being Disney, but this is one of those where I'm like, yeah, it definitely holds up as one of the better movies from those eras where people weren't really too familiar when it came to animation outside Disney. It's not a bloodbath. I expected this to honestly be a lot bloodier given the reputation. I expected to see a lot more deaths. I expect for it to be more intense. Honestly, part of me expected to see rabbits actually getting like experimented on, because the way people describe like the torture stuff, I'm like, okay, so is there a scene where we see like some rabbits getting experimented on? Because it would kind of make sense given how we do see actual animals getting tested on. It doesn't happen as much as it used to, but it still happens. And yeah, I expected that kind of stuff, but no, it's a fairly straightforward story about just these rabbits who are looking for land. They find the land. It turns out that they need more than just land to live. They need, as the movie puts it, women. And yeah, that's all it really comes down to. And it's, we just got the intense scenery, the visuals, the moments, which again makes me say like, okay, so it's not really a horror movie in the same way as the other ones, but in a way it still has the tension that you can find in a horror movie, that feeling of dread of not knowing whether or not these characters are going to make it or if someone's going to kill them. And that is a really loud helicopter. You're always fearing whether or not these characters are even going to be okay by the end of whatever their mission is, which is survival. Even by the end, there's no solution in terms of like, oh, now rabbits will be safe. It still acknowledges like, well, these guys are fine, but rabbits are still going to have to run. They're still going to have to do their best to survive. Frith is not reversing whatever he did because, well, that's the world we live in. Rabbits are in constant danger, and that's okay. So yeah, that's my final movie for October. It probably would have been better if I had chosen something more closer to the holiday, but I saw a movie that I never saw before. I enjoyed it. I'm not going to complain, and hopefully this encourages you guys to watch it. It's currently on HBO Max. I know it's on the Criterion channel, so you have your places to check it out if you don't want to purchase it outright. And if you do, it's definitely a movie that's worth it. I know it's supposed to be on Criterion. I don't know if there's any other DVD or Blu-ray releases, but it's something where, you can just check it out and just look for it. It's a really solid watch. Yeah, and I'm certainly glad I did it, even if it's not the Halloween movie that I expected. But hey, you know what? It's a new experience, and I'm all good with that. So yeah, next time I'm not doing another movie for next week. What I'm actually going to be doing is I'll be here with some special guests. So just hyping that up, talking about movies that never got made. So yeah, that's what I'm doing next week. Unfinished movies, stuff that we've heard about that has potential, stuff like the Yellow Submarine remake, or even, and I know this is going to be surprising for some of you, I'm even going to be talking about some canceled Disney movies, because, hey, if they were canceled, they're technically not Disney, so yeah, they might be a movie that Disney was working on, but again, never finished, so it's kind of a loophole. And yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing, just talking about that stuff with some guests. It's not going to be something where we go too in-depth on some of the stuff, because there's only so much information that's out. But, you'll see what we'll be doing, and hopefully enjoy it. So yeah, I hope you stick around next week for that. But for now, thank you for listening. This has been your host, Octaviano Macias, host of I Can't Believe It's Not the Mouse. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. That's SciCam Films. If not that, you can even support me on Patreon. That's www.patreon.com/SciCams, SAICAMS. www.patreon.com/SciCams. Right now, I don't have anything too special if you support me. So you can do $1, you can do more than that. It's up to you. At most, the only thing that you really get is anytime I do videos, your name will pop up in the credits. Yeah, I'll figure out something to do. If you got any ideas, feel free to comment, suggest them, anything would help. Anything that might interest you in becoming a Patreon supporter would definitely help. So yeah, give me a shout out on that front. So yeah, thank you for listening, and I hope to see you next time.
Be cunning, and your people will never be destroyed.
Hey, just wanted to say thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. Comment below if you had any thoughts on this. And if you want to support me even more, there's always the option of Patreon. Yes, I have a Patreon. Patreon would be a great way to help me grow this channel, as it's a great way to get equipment, a great way to let me know what you guys like, and it's a great way to help me financially. Just saying, the more I have on Patreon, the more time I'll have for these videos. Anyway, thanks again for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.